For the second part of today's teach-in, we'll be joined today in conversation with Valerie Segrest, Susan Sakakaku Sikiakwaptiwa, and Travis Zimmerman. Let's start with Travis. Travis, can you share where you're from and a little bit about your community? And I hope you might also include and explain how the term Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and Chippewa, the words came to be and what you prefer.
Thanks, Renee. Happy to be here, and hello, other panelists and everybody else viewing today. So I'm talking to you today from the Mille Lacs Indian Reservation in Minnesota, and I'm at the Mille Lacs Indian Museum. My father's actually an enrolled member of the Grand Portage Band. And you mentioned Chippewa, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe. Well, like most tribal names, Chippewa is a European name that was given to the Ojibwe people. And today it's mostly referenced in like legal documents for treaty purposes. In 1934 with the Indian Reorganization Act, the bands in Minnesota kind of came under the umbrella organization called the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe. So it's still a term that's used today, but most people, most Ojibwe people prefer either Ojibwe, which can also refer to the language, or Anishinaabe, which in the Ojibwe language means original people.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you. And Valerie, can you go next and share a little bit more about yourself and where you're from?
Sure. Hello there. My name is Valerie Segrest, and I'm from the Muckleshoot tribe, which is located just south of Seattle, Washington, at the base of Mount Rainier, in between the beautiful white and green rivers.
Thank you, Valerie, and welcome. Finally, Susan, how about you?
Nukwantavki, good afternoon. Sikyakuy manayan matiwa nupolvongyam nuputsupalave yafanka. My name is Susan Sikyakwaptiwa, is my English name. My Hopi name is Sikyakuy mana, which means the yellow light that comes off the horizon as the sun is rising. And I'm from the Butterfly Clan, from the village of Sapalavi, and that's located on the Hopi Reservation. The Hopi Reservation is northern Arizona, about 2 hours east as the crow flies from the Grand Canyon. So we're in the northeast part of the state of Arizona.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I really appreciate you sharing your Hopi name as well. I know they're very important. Here we are on the spring equinox today, and I'm hoping, Susan, we can return to you and you can share your favorite traditional food from this time of year.
My favorite traditional food is probably going to be, for this time of year, it's still cold here in Arizona, northern Arizona. We are on the verge of the spring is starting to happen. The weather is starting to warm up, but it's still quite cold. So nowadays, what we're doing traditionally is eating a lot of foods that we've preserved from the previous years. So we'll have things like sweet corn that has been roasted in the pit, and then it's dried on the cob. And then we can reconstitute that to make a food called batifsiki. It's very common. It's very, it's eaten all the time because it's kind of an easy dish, and we use dried beans, and we add either hominy from white corn or the sweet corn. And so it's a pretty common food, and I love it, but it's easy to make. And so we would be eating foods of that kind right now. Traditionally, it's just foods that we've already grown and have been preserved, and then re-eating them, and eating them now because it's too early to grow anything else for us.
That sounds delicious, and I'm sure is really helpful with having a family. We need those foods that are kind of quick to prepare and also healthy and nutritious. So thank you. Valerie, with you, I was reading on the Muckleshoot website that you have over 300 traditional foods. Can you share just one with us today that you love?
Oh, it's so hard. I am so in love with so many of our foods. But because you asked seasonally, you asked Susan about her seasonal food, I'm going to go with that. And today on the spring equinox, nettles are out here in our territory. And they're just these incredible first spring greens that emerge on the forest floor. They're the first little flicker of green that comes out. And they are here to help us wake up and get prepared and build our stamina to be able to live out all those beautiful winter dreams we had for our life in 2021. We need to grow our strength. And that's what nettles actually do on the land. They're dynamic accumulators, capturing energy from the sun and the soil and accumulating those nutrients in their bodies, and then uh, seasonally attuning us to the day and helping to build our collective strength as well.
That's so warming to hear. I can just sort of picture my hands around a warm cup of tea and just sort of drinking in that sunshine. Nettles is such a wonderful plant. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Now let's turn to Travis again. Travis, what is your favorite traditional food and why?
My favorite traditional food would be grouse. Uh, and the reason that I picked grouse is, and if you don't know what a grouse is, it's a small game bird. There's many different varieties up here in Minnesota. We have the ruffed grouse, and food. A lot of times, food and kind of what we go back and remember about food is based on memory, and so that's one of the reasons that grouse is one of my favorite foods, is because it brings up memories of going hunting with my dad and my brothers when we were younger, going grouse hunting. In my later years here, I've been able to uh, go with my dad hunting on the reservation, and he's getting a little bit older, so his eyesight's not as good. So I'm kind of his scout, and I I tell him when I see a grouse, and he appreciates that. And also, just my mom makes some wonderful grouse dishes with wild rice and cream of mushroom soup and things that is one of my favorite meals. So I would have to say my favorite would be grouse.
That's great. I love the comment that you had about memory, because that's so much of what I think these food experiences are, is, making memories and having adventures and having experiences, with family members. And so I really appreciate that. And I had to look up a grouse actually, because I wasn't familiar with grouse myself. Now let's turn to a food or dish and how it's connected to your culture today. Valerie, can you start?
Oh my gosh, so many there. I don't think I'd get away with not mentioning salmon. Uh, Being from the corner of the country known as Salmon Nation, but for thousands of years, Coast Salish ancestors have organized their lives around salmon and the runs that happen here every year, several times in the year. And we still do to this very day. We're out getting our nets prepared right now, this very moment. That's what my family's doing. And so, uh, you know, historically they were fire roasted, and we still do that. We're getting our fire pits ready too, to roast up some salmon and feed our people that first spring run that's coming through.
That's great. And I love this point that you make about, this word organization, because I think that there's sort of a misconception maybe generally about Native people that, there's maybe not, it's a little, I don't know if willy-nilly is the right word, but, that there's not this real thought and incredible organization that it takes to, organize your life and your community's life around these foodways and around the seasons and all of these things. I don't know if you wanted to add any more about that, or
It
share.
takes, I mean, nowadays we're coining it as traditional ecological knowledge. We're hearing that sort of, new buzzword out there. Well, maybe it's been around for a while, but it seems to be everywhere I look nowadays. And I think about how, this being the equinox, I think about following the moon and the moon phases. We had different names for moons, and I'm sure that Susan and Travis, you also have the same thing, that 13 moons teaching. And and to know that, and to be able to connect it at that level, the lunar phases with seasonal attunement and what's uh, coming out, and how we follow those indicators. I think about even when flowers bloom, how that tells us it's not like that when the dogwood flowers bloom here in the Northwest, that tells us it's time to harvest clams. And so knowing that intricate knowledge and that interconnectedness, just really being able to lean into our food web and how we're all just a part of the system, and eating food is a reminder that we're human, that we rely on these things to exist. Without them, we can't function. Our brains don't work. Our body has no energy. We need our foods to be able to survive and thrive on the land. And so the act of being a part of the food system is one of the most honorable things that you can do. It's one of the most meaningful things, provides meaning and purpose and a sense of belonging and a place to be generous and share your gifts and have a real transformational experience in your life by just being involved in your food system and building, like Travis was sharing, those food memories and how that shapes you as a human. So foods are our greatest gift and our medicine.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And we'll have to talk maybe in the future about the dogwood, because we also in Shawnee have a connection with the dogwood. And when it blooms, it tells us to start preparing our lands for planting corn. And we get ready for our spring bread ceremony at that time too. So that's pretty cool. I hadn't known about that connection. Susan, how about you in your community and with a traditional food? Can you share a little bit more with us?
Sure. I think every tribal group has their stories of how foods came to them and why they live in the homelands that they do, and Hopi is no different. Something that's very, very important to us is the blue corn. I have a picture of that here. A piece of that here. And really what it is, this tells us about our heritage. It tells us about our obligation to this place that we call home. It talks about food. It's about seed. It's about to work. It's about humility. All that is represented in this ear of corn. And so the Hopi believe we were given this corn as we entered this earth, and this would be our way of life to be able to survive in this arid landscape that we live in. And so half the community, our menfolk, are the ones who plant this, and they're the ones who are the farmers who actually raise this for us. And when it's harvested, they bring it home and gift it to us women. If they're married, they'll give it to their wives. If they're unmarried, they'll give it to their mothers or their grandmothers. And then it's us women who then take it and bring it home, and they become a part of our families, how we really regard this food. And then we take it and we learn to process it and make dishes out of it. And so from blue corn, you can get something, the blue cornmeal, which I have here as well. And we learned how to process that into meal. And from that, we make a variety of different kinds of breads and dishes. And so this is, as Valerie was talking about, this is really medicine. Food is medicine. And we are an active participant in raising it, in growing it, and making it a part of our families. It's not separate from us. It's not a part of it. It's a big part of who we are. And so when you actively engage in growing your own food, there's so much that happens. There's, of course, the physical fitness and the physicality of getting out there, getting your hands dirty, moving, walking, getting in the hot sun, working. But there's also a real sense of happiness and peace and gratitude and humility, because everything you plant doesn't always come to fruition. There's just nature that you're battling against or working with. And so when you receive a harvest, whatever part you play in that, it brings you joy, and it brings you such beauty into your home. And when you can present that as a dish to your family or to the rest of your community, it just feeds your soul and your heart. And that's really how our connection, I think, is to food. It's more than just a dish we make. And so for us here at Hopi, growing that food is just as important as learning to make it. A baby's first meal when they're born they were given Hopi food, when they're only a few weeks old. And that's just to encourage their palate to connect with the foods that we have in our community. And throughout the years, we, continue to eat and feed each other these so that we don't forget, so that that continues to be a part of our lives and our palates.
Thank you. That's really beautiful. And I love how you talk about how it sounds like the foods also teach us and help us become, better human beings, more humble. Thank you so much. Travis, what about you? What's either a favorite dish or a favorite traditional food that you can share a little bit more about with us today?
Sure. Since it's springtime, kind of going back to what Valerie said, in the Ojibwe moon, cycles, April is actually sugar making moon, and that comes from the this time of year is the sugar bush. So we go out and tap the maple trees for the sap to then boil down into syrup, and then you can process it even further into sugar. And so we just went and tapped trees, me and my staff, and my daughter came up, and we tapped trees this last week. We tapped about a dozen trees, and it kind of took on a little bit more significance, it felt like this year, because going out to the sugar bush every spring is always a sign of renewal, right? Because that's what spring represents is life coming back, and especially in Minnesota, making it through long, hard, cold, snowy winters many years. That spring, it's just nice to get outside when because the trees start running when the temperature starts getting above freezing during the day and below freezing at night. So when you have that fluctuation in temperature, it's the best time that the sap starts to run. And so it's a time of year, that it starts to warm up, the snow's melting. And so going out to tap the trees, it was great because here on the reservation, um, uh, about a mile down the road from the museum here is the powwow grounds for the Mille Lacs Band, where they have their annual powwows, and that area has thousands of maple trees. And so you have families that come out and do the sugar bush. So it's great seeing not only different families out there, tapping trees and working together, but also different programs from the band, like their DNR goes out and they tap trees and do the whole process. The school kids come out and they tap trees, so it's just great to see all these different people from the community out there tapping trees. And kind of back to what Susan said too is part of the experience again is the whole process. It's not just about the end result being maple sugar. It's going out and tapping the trees. It's going out every couple days and checking the sap, right, and collecting the sap. And then once you have it all together, sitting around a fire for many hours, boiling the sap down, But that's a time that stories are shared, and you get to know people, and sometimes we miss. We forget about the social aspects of food and bringing people together, not just when we eat it, but experiencing it and going out and actually um, harvesting it yourself and processing it yourself. That the end product always just tastes a little better, and it just seems to be a little bit more meaningful when you do eat it, or if you're able to share that with somebody else, to give somebody a small jar of syrup or to give them a jar of maple sugar, and just especially elders that maybe don't get out there anymore to do it, and just to see um, their faces light up, because that's exactly what you're doing when you give them those gifts, is you're bringing back those memories a lot of times that they have of when they would go out to Sugar Bush, and who might have been part of that experience when they were doing it. So yeah, I think this time of year, maple sugar is a big hit around here. And I also found out. So I love maple sugar. I put maple syrup and maple sugar like in everything. I baste with it. I put it into my barbecue sauce. I even make, instead of like chocolate milk, I make maple milk. And people give me a hard time about it, like, oh my God, you shouldn't be just eating so much syrup. But I found out recently that it's actually good for you. It's one of these healthy sugars. It has a lot of vitamins, a lot of antioxidants and things like that. So now I have some information to kind of push back against that and say, no, within reason, I'm okay with, eating a lot of syrup and sugar.
It's good for you. Nutrition. Yeah. That's great, Travis. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you sharing like this. It sounds like a lot of reconnection in the community and in families. So, what is a challenge that you think, we have teachers listening, and it'd be great if you could just touch on, Travis, an important challenge to your community's, food system that you think teachers should know about?
Sure. So specifically, in regards to the sugar bush and maple syrup and maple sugar is recently is the effects that climate change is going to bring about in possibly the decline of maple trees. They're saying because of some of the warmer weather um, that that can actually stunt the growth of maple trees, that you're not going to be able to find them in areas that it's going to be kind of further north and north that you're going to, further north that you're going to be able to find maple trees. And where right now they're kind of, if you look on a map and see where you can find sugar maples, it's kind of all along the Great Lakes area, and south of the Great Lakes. And if the weather becomes warmer, not only will that affect the snowfall, but the warmer climates will also start to stunt the growth. And the other thing is that so we have a lot of snow here, and snowfall traditionally the maple trees need that snowpack around the base of the tree to kind of protect their root system. And they're saying that if we keep getting kind of warmer and warmer weather with the effects of climate change, that could eventually damage the root system, and that by when I talked about stunting the growth, if you stunt the growth of the maple trees, what you're going to end up having is not as many new trees regenerating or repopulating the area, because as older trees, die, and the younger trees are their growth is being stunted, there's not going to be enough trees to keep up with production for people to be able to tap. And so climate change is probably the most immediate threat to maple trees and the syrup and sugar.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Valerie, for you and your community, I don't know if it's either a climate change challenge or something else, but can you share with us a challenge that's affecting an important food system for your people?
Sure. And this actually came up for me just listening to you now, Travis, and how the health implications of that. What happens when your maple syrup resource is challenged, and that it, to your point, it's really high in. I'm a nutritionist. I can't not say that it's really high in all the things we need to build our immune systems to stay strong. It's the immunity of the tree, and that's the gift. That's coming out. So you've got like 30% of your recommended daily intake of zinc is in just a tablespoon of maple syrup. That is incredible. There's not many sources of zinc in our common diet. But anyways, I'll stop geeking out on that. I could talk about trees with Travis all day. The what's pertinent to also our educators that are watching this today is the health implications in the education system as well. That historically our ancestors and our first form of literacy was learning how to read the landscape for the purposes of harvesting, hunting, fishing, sustaining life through meaningful interventions with our land. And that our people are still really hardwired to learn that way. And so when you can get outside and get beyond the fear of taking kids outdoors with scissors or whatever, the learning impacts are immense, and the healing that happens when our people are better connected with their lands, and we can address those health implications. We can also address the challenge of not being able to learn as much about our foods and the intricate details of everything that Travis was just able to unpack. We need our next generation to be empowered. And as educators, you're in such a critical space to be able to raise up a next generation of people who are incredible critical thinkers and researchers and feel empowered by science and technology and math and engineering and all those subjects, all common subjects, that our foods are interdisciplinary teachers and will take you through all subjects necessary. So lean into them. They've always been our greatest teachers. They're more than just resources for us. And I think that, Susan and Travis are so great at describing that in so many different levels, that you're getting, you're getting so many impacts by just bringing kids outside and putting a food or a plant in their hand. That's the best teaching you could possibly give. And so simple and common sense to, addressing some of the challenges we're seeing in our communities around health implications, health impacts, climate change, just the diminishing of transmitting that kind of knowledge. You can open up those spaces in your classrooms and do it every single day. I challenge you to not connect it to a subject. It's so easy.
Yeah, I love that. The interdisciplinary approach is so important, but then going beyond the subjects and thinking about how it can make better people, right? It supports our social and emotional, growth. And I know that's really big in classrooms right now, but it's all there. It's this wholesome way of learning. So thank you. That's really very inspiring. Susan, let's turn it back to you. How about in your community? Can you share a challenge that you see or that your community is facing as a whole that you can share with the teachers today?
Yeah, and I think it's a challenge that probably every community faces. It's, we're more sedentary. We're fine with staying more indoors. And I really, in our community, there's a big lifestyle shift based on a value shift. We don't really value or recognize our own community ways and life ways as being that important to spend that much time with. And I say that from experience. I really had to, I was born and raised in my community. I had all this around me, and I kind of took it for granted growing up because it was just there. It's just what life was like. And it really took me to leave for good things. I left for school and other work opportunities. And that's when I really realized what I had here at home, what we have here at home. And I missed it. And I began to value it more when it wasn't just right there. So, I see that in some of our youth, and just saying, oh, it's always going to be here. I don't have to pay that much attention, or I don't really need to do these things now. And so part of it is really balancing that, or helping, I think, us understand what we have is really important and so special. And the way we learn is by going out and doing. Just as Valerie said, we don't learn our traditional food ways in a class. We learn by doing it through ceremonial practice, through just fixing those foods, through growing. And so when your lifestyle doesn't support the time it takes to do that, then you are not, then you don't get that lesson. And so, so on one hand, we encourage everyone to go out and get educated and go live at other places, because interaction with the rest of the world is how we will survive on a tribal scale. But there's so much here that we don't get to learn when we leave. So those are just some larger, some big issues. Climate change, as well as what Travis said, is huge. We already have a dry farming. Way of growing food, which relies strictly on natural rainfall, snowfall, groundwater. We don't add any additional water to that. And the seeds themselves are so strong. They're amazing. They are beautifully connected, but they've had thousands of years to adapt to this situation. So they're challenged already, and we can grow in this environment. But when that balance shifts and we see hotter weather. We see drier weather than we normally have, and we already have pretty dry weather. It's a big challenge to be able to support those foods that that can grow. That shift is happening too fast, I guess. So there's a lot of issues, but we still work to connect everyone, and we don't stop. Even though those challenges are there, we never stop. It's just that's just part of what we do is continue to grow these foods, continue to honor them, continue to do what we know and support them and celebrate them, because in the end that's what they do for us. So even though we see these challenges, it's never hopeless, and that's the outlook that we also offer to the world. Is it might seem that way, but it really isn't. We really have to find ways to look at ourselves, our lifestyles, and how are we contributing to this. And I agree with Valerie. I mean, yeah, as soon as we get outside, all of us, youth and anyone and everyone can get outside and build a relationship with nature, we begin to see how either connected, disconnected, and how we really need to get reconnected to it.
Yeah, and what you're talking about appreciating sort of your own backyard, so to speak, or what you have right in front of you is such a valuable lesson that all of us, everybody watching or listening today, all of us can kind of take heart and just do the work, just get out there and start learning and developing these relationships. So, it's really clear that these food systems and knowledge is really important to be aware of and to take hold of and to learn more about, especially as all of you have mentioned, for youth and future generations. And, all three of you have sort of touched on it, but additionally, what advice do you have for teachers and parents that are listening on how to create deeper connections and have kids value the land and the foods that are around them? Let's start with you, Travis, if that's okay.
Sure. Well, going back to kind of what Susan and Valerie saying, it's just really important to realize everything that is around us. I mean, I think we really take for granted the amount of foods that can just be found even in your backyard sometime, like, dandelion leaves, I mean, every part of the dandelion's edible, and people, spend so much money trying to kill them each year with pesticides and things. And it's a wonderful food source, and it grows prevalent in most people's yards. Kind of going back to what Sean was saying, like, why have lawns? use this space to grow things and to, have wild plants grow that you can just go out and pick right in your lawn. And so I think it's all about getting out and, like to sugar bush, it doesn't take that much. All you need is a maple tree, really. You don't need fancy equipment. Nowadays we use aluminum taps, and we have, bags that kind of block out the ultraviolet rays so that the sap doesn't spoil and all that stuff. But, our ancestors, what they used to tap trees is they used taps, these little spouts, and these are just made out of sumac. They're sumac branches. And sumac has a real pithy center, so it's real easy to get the middle out. And you just need to drill a hole in the tree, put a sumac tap in it, and fashion a little birch bark container to catch the sap in. It could be bigger than this. It doesn't have to be, depending on how much you want to empty it. But this is just a real simple, kind of model of pinching together some birch bark to lay under, the tap. So just to get kids out there doing, and because once they learn that knowledge, hopefully that's something that will stick with them and that they can, pass on generationally. There's just so many gifts and especially in Minnesota, we're so gifted with just the number of lakes we have and the number of food sources and berries and wild game and things like that you just need to go out and explore the world more around you, because you'd be amazed at the number of gifts that you have, just right at your disposal at any given time, really.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. You're absolutely right. Valerie, can you share a little bit more about maybe advice you'd give to teachers and parents watching how to really connect their kids to the outdoors?
Sure. We have these interesting conversations emerging in my community right now around, what kind of cultural values are we prioritizing as our students are leaving our tribal school? Like, what do we want them to hold, deep in their hearts and feel grounded in? Just like Susan was saying, that first, like Hopi food being the first thing that breaks that fast, and what activates, all these important. I just think about all the DNA firing that's happening in people's bodies when that happens. It's so cool. And so some of the things that I think are just they're as applicable to these students as they are to anybody really, is to be a historian first. Get to know something about your tribe, your local tribe, the lands that you're on, the waters, your genealogy, to be a historian first, to know your land and your water and the world that you live in and the territories and all the great teachings. And my mentors and elders always remind me that our greatest teachers are waiting for us right outside the door. You just have to go outside and spend time getting to know them. And they will teach you so many things and take you so far. But to also be responsible for yourself, family values and putting your family first. Don't avoid obligations or procrastinate, get things done. And one of my favorite things from this discussion we recently had is to be a good ancestor. Like how do you want your story to be in the world? And just simple things too, like not, when I ask my 5-year-old, for example, how did that mud puddle get here? And she explains to me parts of the water cycle. I'm just like, it's incredible what these people who are operating at these high frequencies already are students, what they already have, the knowledge that they already are born with, that is so common sense and just empowering and incredible. I want to make sure to have time for Susan. I could talk about how to have fun with kids outside all day.
Yeah, it's so joyful. Thank you. Okay, Susan, do you want to share a little bit more?
Sure. I was just going to say I can listen to Valerie all day too. So some of the things I think, I'm a grower. That's really what my love has grown into over the years. I grow lots of food, and about 8 years ago or 7 years ago, I made a commitment. This was just a personal commitment that I made I want to grow as much of my own food as I possibly can for myself. And I think being very intentional, being very clear about what it is you want to do in your life, really sets up that framework of how you're going to approach it and how you're going to reach that. And so my little backyard hobby garden really turned into this major part of my life. And my lifestyle shifted because growing food takes a lot of time. We hardly go anywhere. We're always home, and I'm expanding my season more and more. So as I connect with the youth particularly, I want everyone to try and grow something. I tell them all the time, just try and grow one thing. And I've learned too that it's not everybody's thing. It's my thing, so I think it should be everybody else's thing. They should love it as much as me, but not everybody will. But try it, because it could be something that you're really good at and you really enjoy, but you won't know unless you've done it. So I'm working with a school right now. We're teaching there's 230 students from kinder to 6. We're talking about how to grow food in this new way with vegetables versus dry farming. And we're having a lot of fun doing it. And some of them you can tell who's excited already on there waiting to do it, some who have already done it, and some who are not quite sure whether they're going to, we might have to kind of pull along. But that's just what we can do as adults is inspire and open the eyes of the younger ones where we can with what we love. Because I think when we show what we love, they can see it. They know I'm not faking. They know I'm not, it's not hard work for me. This is something that I really, really feel is important. Related to that, Hopis have a lesson that we really believe, Hopi people, that we were meant to be placed here. We were meant to live in this desolate, hard area because it would be a really hard life. That hard life really, though, does teach us stewardship. We are meant to be stewards of this earth. So anytime we can remind my own community, and I have to remind myself sometimes, I'm a steward. What does that mean to me? What can I do to steward this earth? And I love to share that lesson with the rest of the world, because we all can play a part in that. We can all steward in some way, but what can you do, and what would you like to do more of? I think that can be a very personal way to reconnect. And then just connect with the environment wherever you are in the country. I can't teach you how to grow anywhere else but here, because the way I grow is connected to my climate, to the conditions of the soil, to the amount of sunlight I get, etc. And so learning how to grow in your environment teaches you so much about Mother Earth. It teaches you great joys, and it teaches you great humility. And you really recognize you're not in charge at all. And that's the beautiful lesson in the end, after you cry over losing everything. But, those are the lessons that we get out of growing food. And I would love for everyone to be able to, especially our youth, to be able to have them connect in those ways, in a small way. And as we grow ourselves, that part also grows, and we may hear a lesson later on in high school and like, oh, okay, now I get that. I heard that before one time, and it resonates differently as we age, I guess is what I'm saying. So just introducing those ideas to everyone, to our youth particularly, is so important.
Oh man, thank you. This has been such a fun and inspiring conversation. I really, truly appreciate all of your time. And to all of the panelists, thank you, Niue, so much. I really do appreciate it.